The stranger in the snow. The winter wind whispered through the bare branches above Emma's head as she made her way down the familiar mountain trail. Snow crunched softly beneath her worn boots, each step leaving a small impression in the white blanket that covered the forest floor. She pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders, grateful for the warmth it provided, even though it had seen better days. Emma had been walking this path for 3 years now, ever since she'd moved to the small cabin her grandmother had left her. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms and a wood-burning stove, but it was home. Every morning she would walk down to the village below to work at Miller's general store, stocking shelves and helping customers for barely enough money to keep the lights on and food on her table. The path curved gently through the trees, and Emma knew every route, every rock, every turn by heart. That's why she noticed something different immediately. There, just ahead where the trail widened near the old oak tree, was a dark shape against the white snow. Emma quickened her pace, her heart beginning to beat faster as she drew closer. She could see it was a person, a man lying motionless in the snow. His dark hair was matted with blood, and his expensive-looking coat was torn and dirty. "Oh my goodness," Emma breathed, dropping to her knees beside him. She pressed her fingers gently against his neck, relieved to feel a steady pulse. Sir, can you hear me?" The man's eyes fluttered open slowly. They were a deep brown, confused and unfocused. He tried to speak, but only a weak groan escaped his lips. "Don't try to talk," Emma said softly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You're hurt. I'm going to help you." She looked around quickly, assessing the situation. The man was too heavy for her to carry, and it was at least a mile back to her cabin, but she couldn't leave him here in the cold. The temperature was dropping, and hypothermia would set in quickly. Emma made a decision. She shrugged out of her jacket and carefully placed it over the man's chest, then began gathering fallen branches and pine needles. Working quickly but gently, she built a small windbreak around him, creating shelter from the bitter wind. "I'm going to get help," she told him, even though his eyes had closed again. "I'll be back as fast as I can." The run back to her cabin felt endless. Emma's lungs burned in the cold air, but she pushed herself harder. Once inside, she grabbed her heaviest blanket, her first aid kit, and filled a thermos with hot coffee from the pot that had been keeping warm on her stove. When she returned to the stranger, he was shivering violently. Emma carefully lifted his head and wrapped the blanket around his shoulders, then helped him take small sips of the warm coffee. "That's it," she murmured encouragingly. Just a little at a time, color slowly returned to his pale cheeks. After several minutes, he was able to speak in a hoarse whisper. "Thank you," he said, his brown eyes focusing on her face. "I was hiking, must have slipped on some ice and hit my head." Emma nodded, cleaning the cut on his forehead with supplies from her first aid kit. "What's your name?" "David," he said quietly. "David Sterling." "I'm Emma Walsh." She secured a bandage over his cut. "Can you walk? My cabin isn't far, and you need to get warm and rest." With Emma's help, David managed to stand. He was unsteady on his feet, and she could tell he was fighting dizziness. But together they made it slowly back through the forest to her small home. Emma settled David on her old couch, piling every blanket she owned around him. She made more coffee and heated a can of soup, the best she could offer with her limited supplies. "This is very kind of you," David said as she handed him the warm bowl. "Most people wouldn't stop to help a stranger." Emma shrugged, sitting in the wooden chair across from him. "My grandmother always said we're all just people trying to make it through. When someone needs help, you help." They talked quietly as the afternoon faded into evening. David told her he'd been hiking alone, taking a break from work stress. Emma shared stories about her grandmother, about her quiet life in the mountains, about her job at the general store. "Don't you get lonely up here?" David asked. Emma considered this. "Sometimes, but there's something peaceful about the quiet. The mountains don't ask for anything you can't give." The next morning, David was feeling much better. The color had returned to his face, and the cut on his forehead was healing well. Emma made breakfast, simple eggs and toast, and they ate together as morning light filtered through her small windows. "I should probably head back to town," David said reluctantly. "I have a rental car parked at the trailhead." "But Emma, I can't thank you enough. You saved my life." Emma walked with him back to the main trail, making sure he was steady on his feet. At the trailhead, she watched him get into a sleek black car that seemed oddly expensive for a casual hiker. But she didn't think much of it. "Take care of yourself," she called as he started the engine. "I will," David replied, looking at her through the open window. "And Emma, this isn't goodbye." 3 weeks passed. Emma had almost convinced herself that David Sterling had been just a dream, a kind stranger who had briefly brightened her quiet world before disappearing back into his own life. Then came the knock on her door. David stood on her small porch, but he looked different somehow. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, and there was something more confident in the way he carried himself. "Emma," he said, smiling warmly. "May I come in?" Over coffee at her small kitchen table, David explained everything. He was David Sterling, not just any David Sterling, but the CEO of Sterling Industries, one of the largest companies in the country. He'd been hiking alone because he'd needed to escape the pressure. the constant demands, the loneliness that came with his success. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told her, "about the mountains, not asking for anything you can't give. I want to give back, Emma, to you, and to this community." Emma listened, overwhelmed, as David explained his plans. He wanted to establish a foundation, to bring resources to small mountain communities like theirs, better jobs, better opportunities, while preserving the quiet beauty that made these places special. "And I want you to help me run it," he said, "if you're willing." Emma looked out her small window at the snow-covered mountains, then back at this man who had wandered into her life as a stranger in need, and was now offering her a chance to help others the way she had helped him. "The mountains taught me something too," David continued quietly. "They taught me that sometimes the most valuable things in life come from the most unexpected places, and the most extraordinary people often live the simplest lives." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't know anything about running a foundation, but you know about helping people," David said. "That's the most important part." Outside, snow began to fall again, dusting the windows with fresh white powder. Emma thought about her grandmother's words, about people just trying to make it through, about helping when help was needed. "Yes," she said simply, "I'd like that very much." David smiled, and in that moment, Emma realized that sometimes saving someone else's life was really just the beginning of saving your own.